As you already know, classes consist of data and the code, which controls these data. The data are called fields or instance variables, whereas the code which controls them is called methods. In our last lesson, we have discussed fields. Today we're going to focus on methods. As a rule, methods are declared this way. Type the name of the method, properties within round brackets, then curly brackets, and within them, the method body. Here type stands for data type, which is returned by this method. This type can be either primitive or belong to a class created by ourselves or by somebody else, if the method must perform some action instead of returning certain data. The type should be specified as void. The parameters can be all kinds of variables. So we must specify the type and then a variable name. If the method lacks parameters, the brackets must be left empty. Unless the type of the returned method is void, that is, if the type is different from void, the method must be terminated by the keyword return and followed by the value we want to be returned, and it must be of the type we have specified when we declared the method. Let's now see how it works on the example of our class box, which we created in our previous lesson. For now, it only contains fields. We used class main to calculate the volume and print it out on the console. Let's now change it and add a method to calculate the volume and print it out. Open our class box and create a new method. It will not return anything. It will only print out the values of the volume on the console. So it means we must write the keyword void. Now give the method a name. Ideally, the name must clarify what this method does. This method will display the volume on the console, so let's call it showVolume. Now open round brackets and specify the parameters. This method will not accept any parameters, so we will simply close the brackets, leaving them empty, and then open curly bracket. Here we're going to type the method body. This method will calculate the volume. Let's create a variable, double volume, and assign it a value. To calculate the volume, we must multiply width, height, and length together. Write a semicolon. After this, we will have to print the volume on the console, so type systemout.println volume. Now let's open method main, delete all the code from here, and create two boxes. Box 1 and box 2. I have made a mistake here. Assign symbol new box. Let the box 1 have all the dimensions equal to 5. And all the dimensions of box 2 will be equal to 10. Now we do not have to calculate the volume and print it out by ourselves. This is already implemented in the method showVolume. To call this method, write the name of the variable, type dot here, and you will see our showVolume method and the information about which type is returned by this method. This method does not return anything. Therefore, here you can see the word void. Do the same for box 2 variable. Now run the program. You can see the values of the boxes 125 and 1000. Now let's figure out what exactly happened here. We have created a box object and assigned the values to the variables. Then we called showVolume method. This method accepted the parameters, the length, width, and height of the object for which we have called this method. That is why in box class we don't have to use the dot operator and specify the dimensions of which object exactly we need. When we are within a class, we can address its fields directly, because it's implied that we address the fields of only that object for which we have called this method. When we called it for the first box, it calculated the volume of the first box. When we called it for the second box, it displayed the values for the second box. At this time, we calculated the volume using showVolume method and immediately printed the result on the console. But what if we want to know the volume of a box for some further calculation, but don't want to display the values on the console? To do this, we must modify our method so that it returns data. Since this method is not going to print out anything, let's change its name. It will be called just volume. We need this method to calculate the volume, so the type of the returned value will be double. And instead of displaying this value on the console, we will simply return it. In order to return a value, you must write the keyword return, and then the data we want returned. Here we have calculated the volume, and it is to be returned. Write return volume. IntelliJ IDEA has just highlighted this word in yellow, indicating that in this case, a local variable is not required. Indeed, we can't do without it. We can return the value immediately. Width times length and times height. Write return and delete this line. Now when for some object we call method volume, it will accept width multiplied by height and by length, and then it will return this value. Let's open class main again, and we can see an error here. It's because showVolume method does not exist anymore. Do you remember how we renamed it? Now this method does not print out anything on the console, but we can retrieve the data from this method. Delete these methods. Let's declare a variable called volume and use it for storing the value returned by the method. Volume1, assign symbol. So when we call method volume for our box 1, we can see that double type is returned. Of course, we can store the retrieved data in a double type variable. Put a semicolon here. We will do the same for our second box. Volume2, assign symbol, box2.volume. Now let's print out the values of these variables on the console one by one. Run the program, and you can see that everything works just the way it worked. So we have learned a lot. Let's briefly sum up. The common syntax for declaring methods looks like this: the type, the name of the method, the parameters in brackets, and the method body in curly brackets. If the method does not return data, but instead performs an action, the type of the returned value must be void. If the method does not accept any parameters, the round brackets must be left empty. If we have specified the type of the returned value, and it is not void, we must return the data using the keyword return. Also, the data type of the returned data must be exactly the same as the one we specified when we were declaring the method. To call a method for an object, we must address it using the dot operator. Write the name of the variable, type a dot, and the name of the method. Now here is the homework assignment. Create a class dog. It will contain 3 fields: the name, string type, the breed, string type, and the speed, int type. Also, there must be 2 methods. The first one will be run. It must have neither values to return nor parameters. It must only print out the word running in one line so many times as it is specified in speed field. The second method is info. It must return a line with the information about a dog, including its name, breed, and speed. This method must not print out anything. Then in class main, in the body of method main, you must create a new dog, assign values to its fields, and then call method info, save the result in a string variable, and print this variable on the console. And finally, call method run. Good luck! See you in our next class.